Hello, welcome to this Read, Writing and Fresh Start Overview spreadsheet. Presumably you're watching this because you want to know a little bit more about how the spreadsheet works and how it might support you in your role, probably as reading leader, possibly working in early years or Key Stage 1, but usually within a senior role in the school, managing and tracking early reading data. There's some functions in here for just tracking normal reading data, which can be developed upon. But in our school, we mostly used it to track children who were using the early reading programs. So either Read, Write, Inc. up to definitely Year 2 and then Fresh Start Year 5 and 6. But we have some children in Year 3 and 4 that we use in both programs. The main purpose and functions of this sheet is that you can log and record read, write in groups on a half-termly basis for every child who uses the program. You can measure the progress within these as numerical data. Obviously, being in red group and yellow group isn't always an easy way to track. You have to know the colour progression and count each child individually or add a counter. I've automated that for you here. It also allows you to monitor children within the fast track intervention. We use it just for the initials of the staff. But then you can see which children are receiving intervention, and then you can monitor them against whether they are or are not making progress. You can organise cross-year grouping lists. So we have two main types of sheet, one per year group and then one that actually shows the groups that each child's in. So we have colours across here, and then we can count up the total number of children. There's also an option of tracking reception slightly separately. So we have the Autumn 1 groups here, but we also have Autumn 1 reception groups, and that is because, as you know, Ruth Miskin advocates making a strong start in reception, where you might want to look at those children a little bit differently or track them a little bit more often, but they can also be combined as well. The spreadsheet also allows you to log historical and mock phonics screening check scores, and we've colour-coded attainment so you can see whether they're on track for their age group. There's an option to link to another spreadsheet which tracks the total sounds learned. Ruth Miskin's team have said they're going to be automating this online on the online tracker if you're on the portal, but if you are not, then it's quite useful just to be able to see whether a child is maybe at the right level for their age in colours but doesn't have the sounds, or has learnt lots of the sounds but is really stuck with their fluency, and really helps the reading leader to diagnose which children need support in which areas, which would benefit from the fast track tutoring programme and which need maybe some reading fluency and some one-to-one reading with an adult. There's also colour automated settings across the spreadsheet, so whenever you change the drop downs of something to yes or no, it changes the colours, so you can highlight send K, send E. Just makes it a bit more visible as you're tracking. Okay, so I'm going to look at it sheet by sheet with you now and some of the functions and how it works. All the data on here is made up for GDPR reasons. There are three main sheet types. So the first type is the drop-down menu, which allows all the drop-downs in the main spreadsheet to calculate and gather data from. So we have all the Read, Write, Inc. and Fresh Start names next to them in numerical values that help me measure progress. You have a drop-down menu for all the Read, Write, Inc. teachers, so you can allocate them a group. Read, Write, Inc. rooms where you might be taking place. Don't know about in your schools, but we find it quite hard to, if you're grouping, streaming across stage, not age, then we all teach reading at the same time. We have to really think about which spaces we're using, and based on the number of pupils, which this also counts up. In Key Stage 2, we also use this to track the reading sets, so depending on which teachers are teaching them, it also means you can use that for a progress measure there. Likewise with Key Stage 2 reading intervention, although this is obviously not directly linked to Read, Write, Inc. and will look different in your school. For the Read, Write, Inc. interventions, the initials here are just the staff that would be running it. Again, they're made up, but this was Amy Collins, then I would know that Amy Collins was leading that intervention. You might want to then add in other reading descriptors, so we use Pixel, so I've colour-coded purple for progress, so my A is at the top, obviously red for a bit of a concern. We can track these as well, and these here are also linked to Pixel, they're the number scores linked to how a child's doing in the mock phonics screening. I'll talk through that in a moment. The other type of sheet, the main type of sheet, is one per year group for the academic year. Every child is on there. goes up to 100 children with all the codes in, but you could extend that by just copying and pasting a row. Then there is the other final type of sheet is the grouping sheets. So you can see along the bottom we've got the year groups, and then we have the groups for each half term, different one for reception, and again a different one for Fresh Start. So let's have a look at those. Within each group, I'll take year 2 as a generic because it doesn't have too much variation. Within each group you can put the child's name and surname, class, gender. These are fixed so that you can only put M or F in those. Likewise, true and false for pupil premium. So if I put true, that becomes pink, so they're easier to visualise how much of a need there is in that year group. But if I tried to put L, it would block me from doing so. Well, no, it wouldn't. You can just put those ones straight in case you coded it separately. For EAL and send, you can track K, E, and yes and no. We have a column here for putting in the date that children arrived. Can just be quite useful when you're wondering why they're not on track. Working at and working towards about whether or not they passed the phonics check. So these are the year 2s. You might have 2 children who didn't pass last year, and you keep them on there, which will help you when you're tracking them. Then we have the children that are receiving tuition throughout the different 5 half terms in the year. A direct link to the total sounds learnt. You need to insert the link yourself to a sound analysis grid spreadsheet. I can give you some guidance on that if you contact me. Then you have the groupings. So you would baseline assess them either at the end of the summer term or at the start of the new school year. And you put them in their group. Then you do it again 6 weeks later. 6 weeks later again for each half term. These are numbers 23-24 for this school year, 2023-24. It then monitors progress on a half term and a termly basis and colours that. So 1 is the expected progress per half term. So to make 2 in half a term's progress, as Child A did in autumn 1, is great. However, to make 2, they stayed on purple, so then they made 2 in a term. That's actually only yellow because it's on track, but it's not accelerated progress. But then again, they made 2 in the next half term, which is more than expected. And in the summer term, they only made 1 from the end of the autumn term to the end of the summer term, which is below expected, so it's red. However, with all the accelerated progress, the end of year progress here was better than expected. So the child has made good progress, which if you know Read, Write, Ink World, you know that a child coming into year 2 on red is not doing very well and is very behind, and at yellow they should then be able to catch up if they haven't passed the phonics screening. That's the basic functions of the sheet. As you type the group in, the child's in, a couple of things will happen behind the scenes. If the child's gone from comp and then they go to, we call it 5Es, that's our reading program, it means they're off the Read, Write, Ink program. You can select that they've gone to age expected. You can drop in that they've left, and then in the older year groups there's also a drop down into Fresh as well. It automatically colour codes what they're in, so if this child down here started in green, it would automatically colour the box green for me. It won't show me progress there until I've got a second piece of data. They stay in green, I'm going to get a sad 0 and then it's red. Now this data is also feeding into our second type of sheet. So this is our 23rd of July Read, Write, Ink group is going to be my autumn 1 groups if you assess at the end of the year or the start of the school year. And those children, as you can see, child A I said was in red, and here they are in my red list. Now this tracks across the whole school. If you do track across the whole school, then it creates a whole list of totals. So I've got 12 children in green so far, but you can also count individually. So 9 in year 1, 2 in year 2. It then counts the total number of children who've been assessed and included in each year group, and also counts up the total number of children in the whole programme, which might vary on term to term. Obviously you're hoping they'd be off the programme by year 2, but it just means that you can really keep an eye on those children who are not on track. On this sheet, we use this as a main thing to print out. We were spending a lot of time cutting and pasting names of children and having to change it on tracking data as well as on printouts for staff to see the pupil lists. This does this automatically. So whenever a child is added to a group, they're added to this list, their name pulls over, and it counts up automatically as well. There's a drop-down menu for including which teacher is teaching and for which room they're in. And again, if you want to change the drop-down menus, you go back to that first drop-down menu list. The yellow and the white here is for whether or not they're on track. So in year 1, at the start of the year, you're on track if you're in purple in autumn 1, whereas in year 2 you should be in yellow by that point. There is a different version of these sheets for every half term. A lot of them are hidden at the moment. There is one for the main read write ink, there's one for reception, and then we have a crossover of how we're combining them. So what we found is that in autumn term we usually keep our groups separate because we follow the making a strong start in reception, but by later on we might be combining, and we're looking at, my green highlighting here is just done manually to say whether we're treating the groups as combined or not. So at the start of the year there's a couple of children who are accessing our hub provision. They would be, that's our send, often non-verbal. They might be including reception and Key Stage 1 children together, whereas I might have my Key Stage 1 totals separate for this half term, and my reception ones here. That's just an additional function we added in there. Likewise with Fresh Start, we keep that separate again. Obviously there are many modules for Fresh Start, going up to 30, so I don't have 30 drop downs. You need to allocate which module you're going to run, and reflect the data accordingly. So if I'm working with my year 5s, and I want to say that a child's in module 25 and module 29 in the autumn data, the one we assessed in July, you'll notice they're not coming up, and that's because there is no module 25 and 29. So that was child F and child R. In my Fresh Start groups, they're not there. If I put in module 25 here, oh, apologies, wrong one, that was in my October one. If I put module 25 in here, okay, and then my Fresh Start groups, you can see they've come up there now. I've changed that to module 25. Child F is included in there. If a child assessed at module 24, you might then decide manually on a piece of paper in your grouping meeting to put them in module 25 because you've only got, say, 2 staff members running it. Okay, so that's our main 3 types of sheets. In our year 2 here, we have an example child who's followed the progress through. We looked that through earlier. We also have the initials of the person who's doing the tuition. Now what's really helpful here, actually we can see it with our year 1s, is that I've included the data for all these children here and how much progress they've made for 2 half terms. I can now think about the teacher who's teaching this group, and I can say, okay, I'm going to look at my orange children, how are they doing? If they were orange last time round, oh wow, all my orange children have made it onto yellow, great. That might affect who I put in the next teaching group, where I prioritise my group size. If you have any less convenient, spaces, we have some noisy spaces, I might give that to a group of children that I know are progressing well. Likewise, you might then say, I'm going to look at my current group, the children who were green. Okay, lots of them have progressed to purple, but these ones haven't. Okay, I need to put them into the intervention now because they really are quite behind. Add them to my October interventions and put those children in. And then later on, I might say, okay, I want to have a look at the children who are, so let's say they make it from green to pink. Then when I track that, I'll be able to see that the children who had this adult, okay, they've made better progress now, that's working for them, or in this case it's not working for them. In reception, it's just a little bit different because we can track the baseline rather than the July, but essentially it's the same progress measure. In the grouping sheets, you'll see again that it's coloured by age appropriate, by age expected, and that there are counters in there too. The most useful function we found this for is, as I said, for sharing with staff. So you've got lists of pupils. It's also really useful for grouping meetings, so staff can go in and see how many sounds their children know and where they were at previously. So if I'm in show all again, hide my counters, okay, if I've just been told that I've got a red group, pink group, go for a bigger one, I can go and see how many of those children, okay, they're all continuing pink. That's going to mean that they have done books 1 to 7, and I'm going to have to start a little bit later on, maybe look at some of the non-fiction, and then I do the same thing for the children I'm taking in the year 2s if you were streaming across your school. We have high levels of pupil mobility, so we do stream across the school, and that's probably the most useful function of this sheet. You do not need to recreate these every half term. It's all set up for you. So when a child reaches, so we've got the autumn ones in here, but if you click on here, you can right click, you can unhide, and there are sheets for all of the half terms. I might want to look at my spring 2 now. I've already shown one spring 2. There we go. Now I've got all my spring 2 groups up, and because I've been fiddling around with the data there, I've got a year 2 child who is not on track, a year 2 child who's just on track. I might then go back to that year 2 sheet and take child B off the intervention in the autumn and summer term because they're now on track. And you can see the accelerated progress they've made through the intervention. You can then use the progress at the end of the year, create averages at the bottom. I haven't put those in because you might want to add additional sheets in. Usually I find I create that data and then pull it off into a separate piece of analysis because this is very much a working document. I think those are all the things to share. Feel free to drop me a question or a message if you are not sure about anything. One more function is in the year 1. When they're preparing for the phonics screening. We have their phonics test scores. Let's just include them all again now. Okay, so if in the autumn term a child is scoring 3, that's red. If in the autumn term they're scoring 10, it's also red. 20. Okay, so 20 out of pass mark being usually 32. In autumn term of year 1, you're only halfway through a 2-year phonics program. That's okay. If you're doing 25, that would be green. You're very likely to make 32 by the end of the year. And if you're already scoring above, you get super bright green. Now you notice if I put the same numbers in the spring term, I don't get the same colours. That's because I really want to track which children are looking like they're at risk. So obviously, accelerated, you're on track to pass is still great, although slightly later on we might think, well, actually it's the summer term and you're only one mark over and you haven't, I just want to be aware that you haven't made progress there. But here we might have we might have 20 here, and that's now not on track. Notice in this autumn term that was yellow. Now we're really worried. You're end of this May half term. You're a week away from the assessment. You're a week away from taking the assessment, and the child is not ready. And then they might be unlikely to pass, and they will go on to your WTs at the end of the year, ready for their year 2. So which ones you need to keep focusing on. Likewise, that 25 that was yellow here now it's become it's still yellow, but that's quite a risky group. Spring and summer, your yellows are at risk. So that's another useful function there. And in older year groups it looks a little bit different, so you don't have all that tracking in year 2. You do have the WAWT. In year 6, so they're saying Key Stage 2, we have the read writing options. Obviously you can see that far less children are accessing it, so you might just filter it by taking out all the taking out all the blanks, so you only track the children who are accessing the read writing from Fresh Start. That might be 3 children in your year 4, so you can track their progress on a kind of individual level. We include pixel grades, so I could now go in and say, okay, this child A is not accessing Read, Write, or Fresh Start, but I am going to use this to track that they are at A2, they're doing really well. I haven't used a progress measure for this. That's because on Pixel only has 6 bands, so you wouldn't really expect a child to go from the very lowest band to the very highest band across a year. Good progress for a child is to move from what they call B1, so kind of just below, up to an E, which is expected. So that would only be 1 mark progress, and it doesn't really tell us much. You could add that in. I'm happy to advise on that, but we basically just have this as a track so I can see how many children are doing in each year group. We do that termly, so you'll only see that every term for year 3, 4 and 5. However, in year 6 with the run up to SATs, we put it in every half term so I can track a child going from B2, they might still be, or we might get them up to a B1 with plenty of intervention, they might stay on a B1, and then we might get them up to an E, and then they are okay on their SATs. So those are all the functions I can think to share. Please feel free to drop me any questions, and good luck tracking your Read, Write, Ink and Fresh Start. Thank you very much.